Imperial Japanese Navy vessel Shimakaze. Shimakaze is an experimental destroyer of the Imperial Japanese Navy, the fastest Japanese destroyer carrying the most powerful torpedo armament among all. Maizuru Naval Arsenal. Not long prior to the start of the Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, a naval arsenal was founded in Maizuru, located on the coast of the Sea of Japan. When World War I broke out, the arsenal had already become one of Japan's most important shipbuilding centers. For more than 40 years of their history, the shipyards at Maizuru launched several generations of destroyers, the arsenal's main specialization. Among the ships built there, destroyers Umikaze, Tachibana, Minakaze, Yugumo, Akizuki, and the experimental Shimakaze deserve special mention. Technical Department. One of the main developers of the armament and power systems for the Japanese fleet was the Technical Department of the Ministry of the Navy. The department developed a number of projects for artillery systems, torpedoes, and propulsion plants. In particular, in the late 1910s, the department created the very first 610mm or 24-inch torpedoes eventually used by the Japanese Navy. At the end of the 1920s, the department introduced the 127mm or 5-inch Type 3 guns, which became the basis for the artillery armament of most Japanese destroyers of the 1930s and 40s. Destroyers of a special class. A key stage in the evolution of Japanese destroyers was the creation of ships of what was called the special class in the second half of the 1920s. Due to restrictions set by the Washington Naval Treaty of 1922, emphasis was placed on the construction of large warships with powerful weapons. The characteristics of these destroyers were 1,750 tons of displacement, 6 127mm guns, and 9 610mm torpedo tubes, which made the whole world pay attention to them. The lead ship in the series was Fubuki, laid down in June 1926 at the Maizuru Arsenal. Hatsuharu-class destroyers. The London Naval Treaty of 1930, signed by Japan among other world powers, restricted the displacement of destroyers to 1,400 tons. With such limitations, it was impossible to create a ship that could match the might of the special class destroyers. However, Hatsuharu-class destroyers, laid down between 1931 and 1933, had their own advantages. They were the first warships to carry long lances, immensely powerful 610mm oxygen torpedoes that were destined to become famous later on. Shiretsuyu-class destroyers. The next series of destroyers in the Imperial Japanese Navy were 10 Shiretsuyu-class destroyers laid down between 1933 and 1935. Thanks to the modified hull lines and architecture of their superstructures, these destroyers were more stable and reliable platforms for solid artillery and torpedo weaponry compared with their predecessors. A noticeable evolution in the increased effectiveness of their torpedo salvos was achieved with the help of quadruple tube launchers connected by telephones with command posts. Destroyers of the cruiser class. As a result of the critical decisions of the Japanese government to withdraw from the existing international treaties, the military command of the Imperial Japanese Navy was finally able to design warships without being limited by artificial constraints. This is how the large, well-armed destroyers of the cruiser class came to be. The lead ship Asashio entered service in August 1937. The state-of-the-art weaponry she carried included 25 mm or 1-inch anti-aircraft guns, which soon became the main means of short-range anti-aircraft defense for Japanese warships. Kagero-class destroyers. A further development of the Asashio-class destroyers was the large series of Kagero-class warships. The lead destroyer, laid down in September 1937 at the Maizuru arsenal, was followed by another 18 ships. The military command of the Imperial Japanese Navy considered these ships to be near-perfect representatives of their type. Thanks to their solid size and fuel capacity, Kagero-class destroyers could operate far from their bases, while their powerful weapons made them extremely dangerous adversaries, even for battleships. Shimakaze. Laid down in August 1941, Shimakaze, Japanese for island wind, was an experimental 2,500-ton ship that would become the firstborn of a new generation of destroyers of the Imperial Japanese Navy. The propulsion plant, developed by the technical department of the Ministry of the Navy, ensured that the destroyer could reach a 40-knot or 46-mile-per-hour speed at high stream parameters. Thanks to the use of quintuple tube torpedo launchers, the number of torpedoes in a salvo was as many as 15. Shimakaze entered service in May 1943, at the height of the Pacific War. 127mm mounts, Type 3. One of the revolutionary innovations of destroyers of the Special class, which appeared in the late 1920s, were the fully enclosed, shrapnel and weatherproof 127mm Type 3 main battery twin mounts, with separate vertical aiming for their guns. At the time, no destroyer in the world could boast of having such weapons. 127mm Type 3 mounts became the basis for the main artillery of Japanese destroyers until the 1940s. Shimakaze's guns had a maximum elevation angle of 75 degrees and could theoretically hit airborne targets. Close-range AA defense. By the mid-1930s, aviation had developed to such an extent that something more powerful and sophisticated than machine guns were required to counter it. The Japanese Navy relied on 25mm or 1-inch automatic guns from Hotchkiss. After successful tests, Japan launched mass production of them. The 25mm anti-aircraft guns became the mainstay of the short-range AA defense of nearly every Japanese warship, acting as the last line of defense against airborne threats. These guns remained on Japanese ships until the Imperial Japanese Navy ceased to exist. Propulsion Plant. The experimental nature of Shimakaze was mainly manifested through the new type of propulsion plant she carried. The boilers and turbines installed were designed under the influence of German technology and worked at a high steam parameter, providing 1.5 times more power than the standard engines of Japanese warships. During sea trials, Shimakaze's propulsion plant reached a capacity of nearly 80,000 horsepower, enabling the destroyer to hit speeds of over 40 knots. Long lances. The most formidable weapon of the Imperial Japanese Navy was the 610mm Type 93 torpedo with an oxygen engine. Developed on the cusp of the 1920s through 1930s, enemy fleets could do very little against the torpedo's unprecedented range of up to 40 kilometers or 24.8 miles, as well as 500 kilograms or 1,102 pounds, and later 750 kilograms or 1,653 pounds of explosives. Equipped with 3 quintuple tube torpedo launchers with Type 93 torpedoes, Shimakaze could theoretically single-handedly send an entire enemy squadron to the bottom while remaining out of sight the entire time.
Союзники, захватываем точку. We've been spotted. All stations, concentrate fire on the target. Reporting the position of a strategic target.
敵視の確認。優勢になりました。エンジンブースト解除。 ンジンブースト始動。敵駆逐艦撃沈しました。
I'm gonna add a very quick postscript here. Understand that the results you're just seeing in terms of how much I got back from playing this game are not indicative of what happens when you play the Shimakaze, we're gonna say properly this time, because there is an ideal build and I don't have it. I may or may not come back to let you know what that ideal build is, but I will tell you this: if you are on console, the last upgrade that you can get right before you put on the Type 93 Mod 3 long lances, make sure that you put on torpedo reload, and you want to have Tanaka at maximum level and max legendary as your commander, along with anybody who can reduce your torpedo reload time. Okay, because it's kind of long. If I do the math right, I think you can get up to about a 70-second reload, or I should say down to a 70-second reload, if everything is maxed out and you do it right. So that's about all the advice I have, along with stay hidden. You're not a gunboat. The Shimakaze will lose a gunfight, so don't shoot unless you absolutely have to. If you have no other recourse. But you do. It's called range, and it's called torpedoes. Use those first. I repeat, do not use your guns. Stay hidden. That's all I have to say for you now. I thank you for watching this long video. Have a beautiful day.